Welcome to the I Am One podcast, where we chat with Postpartum Support International volunteers to discuss why and how exactly they're supporting the mental health of new families. I'm your host, Danny Giddens. I'm a perinatal mental health certified advocate, a support group leader in my community, and a staff member here at PSI. Hearing one person's story on a podcast changed the trajectory of my life. It was the catalyst to me opening up about my undiagnosed postpartum anxiety, depression, and OCD, processing my own trauma, and realizing that advocacy is my life's work. I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Jankowski-Newton.
It's me. I'm the co-host,
Director of PSI's Climb Out of the Darkness program. We've discovered that there is strength in processing trauma and empowerment in sharing stories.
So that's what we're here to do. Our guests will take us on their journey from pregnancy or adoption through their low on to getting help and finding themselves again. And finally, how they're making a difference today. As I always say, it's the coolest club you didn't want to join, because being a part of PSI means we went through something. And as a result, I've become connected to the coolest, kindest, most fun people that I would have otherwise never had the chance to meet.
One of the most important things that we've learned is that we're not alone. There's something powerful in knowing I am one of many. Whether you're already connected to the perinatal mental health world, looking for ways to support parents and families, or just want to hang out with us in your earbuds, we're so glad you tuned in.
And who knows, maybe we'll hear from you next.
On today's episode, we're sitting down with Tony Pacitti, a writer and a peer support group facilitator of PSI's Dad's Group. When he's not facilitating support groups or chasing his very energetic 3-year-olds around, he can be found in a book. But for today, you can also find him in a podcast. Tony shares about welcoming and caring for newborn twins while his wife was experiencing postpartum psychosis, and how his PTSD from this traumatic postpartum period has fueled an inner fire to help other dads like him. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the I Am One podcast are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or any other form of professional help. Our discussions cover personal stories of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and may feel triggering to some listeners. Your number one priority is to take care of yourself. So if you are in need of help, please reach out to the PSI helpline by calling or texting HELP to 1-800-944-4773 for help in English and in Spanish. At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Tony, welcome to the podcast studio. We are really excited because you are bringing the very first dad perspective to the I Am One podcast, and you'll bring us down an entire octave. And I mean that in the best way. That's a movie reference for everybody out there. Anyway, all that to say, welcome. We're really happy that you're here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored to be the first partner on the pod too. It's a big responsibility.
Tony, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are?
Sure. I am Tony. I live in Rhode Island with my wife and our twin sons, who are 3 years old.
Oh, twin 3-year-olds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Three is something.
It's a diabolical age.
It is a diabolical age. Oh man. Yeah. One of them took a nice little header off the deck yesterday. There was so much blood for such a teeny tiny cut.
Head wounds are extra bloody.
Yeah. Bleed a lot.
Yeah. I forgot. It's been a while since I was clumsy
since you
all
jumped
day,
off
every
the
day.
deck.
That's the challenge, is managing, like, not only at 3 their little egos are coming online, but like they're really like they're testing every physical and emotional boundary, which is hard because I mean, like kids are not easy, twins are not easy, but the last like 6 months or so, it was like, oh, this is really hard. And like, I thought we went through some hard things as a family, but yeah, it's just challenging. They're real little people now. But yeah, so that's my family story. And then, yeah, I'm a technical writer. I've been working, but a fun little side project. I've been getting into copy editing for a board game, which I think we talked about last time, possibly
we
when
did.
we chatted.
talk
But
about.
an old friend of mine has designed a game that he plans to crowdsource. It's been using like my 9 to 5 work skills, but in a completely different headspace. It's been fun. It's been really cool.
Can you tell us, Tony, a little bit about the role that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders have played in your life personally?
Our boys were born April 2020, so we had been struggling with infertility for a number of years, and finally got pregnant with IVF. They were eggs 4 and 5 of our third transfer. The pregnancy took and was going great early enough before COVID that like I was there for everything. I was there for all the checkups.
Yes.
I was in the office. I saw the first ultrasound, all that stuff. And then it was when things started shutting down in Rhode Island, when they started restricting, what. Yeah, it was early, like mid-March, where I was no longer allowed to go to the regular checkups. And at that point, too, because my wife did have preeclampsia, she was going a couple times a week, and like it was one of those things where it was a bummer, but I hadn't missed those big milestones. I was able to be there, like I said, for first ultrasounds and getting to see them kind of wiggle around and stuff. They were born in April. They were great. They were just a little small, so they ended up being in the NICU for 2 weeks, but thankfully nothing besides the fact that they were like too small to send home. Lorenzo was 5 pounds 3 ounces, and the Max was 313.
Oh,
And then
Max.
they drop a little bit of weight too. So but
did they both come home at the same time, or was it
no? They were
Lorenzo first
discharged a
and
few
then
days apart.
Okay.
How was that? Like being discharged separately?
It was kind of nice. It kind of let us acclimate a little slower.
Yeah.
Right.
And then so like where the PMADs came in is after. So they were born. And then a week later, we had to go, we got discharged. They were born on a Friday. We went home. I think it was Monday morning. And my wife had preeclampsia, so her legs were like enormous, and not like it was clear. Like every other nurse was like, "Oh my god," or "Yeah, it'll get better."
Your nurses,
So we go home and like, yeah, it didn't get better. She had some complications. She like started feeling lightheaded. It was like seeing spots. So her OB was like, okay, it's probably best if you come in. So just go to the ER at the obstetrics hospital. They'll check you out. I'm sure it's going to be fine, but better that you come in. So that was a week after the boys were born. I bring her back to the hospital, and she's like, look, I'm here because I have to be. The boys are in the NICU. Like, nobody has slept. Why don't you just go home? Go get some rest. Give our folks an update. I'll call you when I get to a room. And she called me that night. She sounded a little irritable. It was a little voice. It started as a little voice in the back of my head. It's like, she's probably just exhausted, because obviously she would be, but like, remember to do like a wellness check tomorrow when you see her, just like see how she's feeling. And then so I went to the hospital the next day. I checked on the boys, went to see her, and she was kind of like grumpy and paranoid in a way that didn't seem normal. She was like, no one's listening to me. And then she was saying things like, are we on the same page? Are you and me on the same page? And she kept repeating things a lot. And it wasn't even just like repeating herself because she didn't think she was being heard. Like, she was repeating herself a lot. She was almost getting stuck in loops.
Okay.
Yeah.
But while we were in the hospital that second time after she was readmitted for the physical stuff with preeclampsia, we went up to the NICU. I don't remember if it was that night or it was that night. It must have been that night. So the day after I brought her back to the hospital, and she'd spent like I said, it'd been a week, and she'd spent maybe like 4 hours with the boys, 4 or 5 hours total, because she like physically, like, it was so hard for her to like move out of her bed in the hospital. And then once we got home, like getting her in and out of the car was just such a procedure, and like she just physically couldn't do it. So she was so excited. We went up. We spent like 2 hours in the NICU, and we were finally getting like that time we had like spent 9 months waiting for. She does skin to skin.
And longer than that, because you had infertility issues. So really, it was
right.
longer than that you had been waiting for
these moments, right?
Moment.
Yeah.
So she was getting to do that skin to skin. She tried nursing Max for the first time. And then after a couple hours, she was like, okay, I'm starting to get tired. So let's head back and I can turn in. And Max wasn't taken from her. She handed Max to the nurse. And then like, as soon as he was out of her hands, like her face physically changed. And like suddenly she was talking nonsense. She was saying things that she was talking about friends and like she was talking about us stuff, but telling it to the nurse, and like she just wasn't making sense. And then she was getting kind of short of breath. Her heart was going. So they called in some other doctors, and then that was the kind of like inciting moment. And for the next 36 hours, like it all built up to like a full blown psychotic episode where she, the next morning she suddenly like, she thought she was still pregnant. She was like pantomiming having the boys. She was pantomiming being her own doula. And then by later that afternoon, I'd gone to the back to the NICU, and I had only been there like maybe 10 minutes. And then someone called and she's like, something's happening with your wife. You need to come back here. She's in distress. And I got out of the elevator and I just heard her screaming. It was like just this awful stream of consciousness where like every disappointment or regret that I'd known her to have, like all these like disconnected memories were just kind of like coming out, and nobody
out of her mouth.
Yeah. She was just like screaming about relationships that she felt bad about, and like, things that didn't go the way she'd wanted. Her voice and what she was saying, it felt like violent. It was so intense, and nobody really knew what to do. They finally kind of were able to like sedate her, and we were at the maternity hospital. And Rhode Island Hospital is right down the street. So they're like, we've done everything we can here. We need to send her to a hospital for adults. They wanted to check for like if there was physically something going on in her head. They wanted to check for like encephalitis. So she got a spinal tap.
Or like an allergic reaction to some kind of medication that was causing
exactly
like, inflammation or so. Yeah, I mean, it could have been anything.
Yeah. Well, like, one of our friends was like, oh, like I know she's been on a catheter, and like my grandma had a UTI and made her kind of lose her mind for a couple of days. You should ask them. And I asked them, and they're like, well, she's not 70, but yeah, we'll check. Like, I guess it's something that happens with older people but anyway, they weren't that dismissive, but they were very like,
thank your friend for that suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell WebMD, we'll look into it.
How long did it take from when they took her there until like you had answers, you had like terminology, you had a sense of like what was actually happening?
It was kind of an evolving situation. Like at that point, they're like, yeah, this could very well be postpartum psychosis. Depending on who I was talking to, there was debate as to whether or not the timeline matched up. Some people were like, a week after sounds about right. Some people were like, it might be too early to tell, but let's keep an eye on it. No one was ever dismissive. Again, it's the COVID of it all. I'm wondering in hindsight, the rules were changing every day at the hospital. And I'm not saying anyone was like brushing us off or passing the buck, but I do wonder if there was a sense of like, let's just get her home. It became clear there was something to watch out for.
I could see that.
So yeah, she was at Rhode Island Hospital. She was there for a couple of days, was discharged. She seemed fine. She was given some medication. Yeah, we were just told this could be this. Sleep is very important. But we had twins that were.
Hey, did you get the memo? We have like 2 brand new babies, and they're not really like, they don't really know.
Self-sufficient. Yes,
day and night.
Yeah. So we did get some help initially. And again, they were at the NICU still. Well, all this was happening. So they were well taken care of. So she was able to sleep. Fast forward to a month later, she was doing pretty well for a number of weeks. And then at the beginning of May, things took a turn where she kind of like retreated into herself, became very depressed. Sleep just wasn't happening. And I tried as best I could with the limited help we were willing to ask for, again, given what was happening in the world.
Yeah.
Trying to get some help with feedings, because we were feeding them every 3 hours through the night. But yeah, she became deeply depressed. I'd have to like drag her out of bed and really like beg her to help, just because I couldn't. And if there was one of them, I probably would have tried to do a lot more and probably done a lot of undue harm to myself trying to keep everything afloat.
Right.
But yeah, eventually, I knew she was keeping things from. I could tell that like there was more going on that she was telling me, and
like she wasn't being forthcoming with like
right.
how she was feeling, what she was thinking.
Yeah. So she eventually, I was able to get her to tell me that she had kind of come to the conclusion on her own that she didn't want to be a mom, that she didn't love our kids. And the way she put it was, I think you'd all be better off if I wasn't here, if I was gone. And like, I was like, do you mean like you don't want to be married anymore? You just want to like, you need some space? And she's like, I've been thinking about hurting myself. So we got her on the phone with her
Wow.
therapist. And once that was finally said out loud, and again, it was just weeks of, not just like begging to like be involved with the kids. And like, I was trying my best to be compassionate, but it's so hard. My own exhaustion and just the demand of the twins kind of like compounded with it. And there was like, there was resentment on my end. And I feel so guilty about that, but I didn't know. And then once she finally put it to words, everything happened quickly. She talked to her therapist. I think she gave the phone to me, and her therapist was like, she needs inpatient treatment. So you got to get someone to the house to watch the kids. You got to put her in the car. There's a great facility in Providence, so like it was very close. So I brought her there. She was there for 2 weeks. I wasn't allowed to visit. I could talk to her when she wanted to, but she didn't really want to. She was discharged. Again, she kind of like kept things to herself. She said what she thought people wanted to hear so she could come home. And then a couple weeks later, I had to bring her back. And at that point, we all knew, she's being very cagey. She's talking around the issue. So at that point, I'm not saying the care was better, but I think they had a better handle of what was happening. So yeah, I mean, all said and done, she was in an inpatient treatment for almost 40 days. And halfway through that second stint, it was clear that meds weren't working. So she ended up getting ECT, which is a electroconductive therapy. And that kind of like punched through the dam, as it were. And after a couple of treatments, she started to sound like herself. And yeah, at that point, we're like late into the summer after the boys were born. And the biggest side effect was that she has no memory really from the beginning of the year up through like October. So she doesn't remember having the kids, but she doesn't remember what her experience with the psychosis was either.
You remember it all, and that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's kind of like living in a haunted house in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? That memory's there. I remember after she came home after the second time, and she was herself again. We put the kids down, and one of them was crying, so I went in just to like sit and rock him. And in the other room, her and my mom were just like having dinner and just like talking and laughing. And I went, I had gone from being so like just hopeless and scared and thinking like the person I married and the mother that I knew she wanted to be is just not this person's not coming back. Even if she comes home, our lives are going to be radically different. And then suddenly, like, she came back herself, and it was like this whiplash effect where, like, I went from her not wanting to be a mom anymore to her not remembering what had happened, and just like acting normally because
in this twilight zone, kind of like, what is happening?
Yeah. So I just remember that feeling of like being in the nursery with, I think it was Max, and just holding him and just like. I was just shaking. I just didn't know how to feel. Having gone from being so scared and hopeless to like not having the reason to be anymore. It was reality changed so much. But anyway, like the haunted house thing is like, it's been 3 years, and in the morning, if she doesn't, if I get up first and like I get the boys ready to go and like I go in and be like, hey, I'm like, is it happening again? like there's some of it that I just haven't been able to shake. And she's sort of like, she's starting to like work with her doctor to dial back on some of the antipsychotics that she's been on for the whole time. So like vigilance is like super high. And again, it's a guilt thing where everything indicates like, I know, like there have been moments where she's like, I don't feel right. I'm going to call my therapist. She tried to dial back on her meds like a year and a half ago. And she's like, no, this is too soon. I'm going to call our doctor. We're going to bump it back up. So that communication is back. She's not holding things back anymore. But it feels like I don't trust her. And finally, my therapist was like, yeah, you have PTSD about this. Like,
yeah.
I was just going to ask you about how it has gone processing this from on your side. I mean, not just the part where you're holding things together while your wife is getting the help that she deserves, but you have needed, and we all need support, right? And so it sounds like you regularly see a therapist.
Yeah. having 3-year-olds kind of put me back there. I was like, I was
Thanks,
being
guys.
like, yeah, exactly. Just, I know what kind of dad I want to be, and I wasn't being that. But yeah, I mean, it's the same therapist I had all through that period when Sandra was in the hospital, and after that. It is hard. I asked her the other day, do you feel defined by what you went through? And she's like, no, not at all. And she asked if I was, and I was like, yeah, I'm still like scared every day. It's an odd thing. I think I'm able to see, as weird as it sounds, like the silver linings that came from it. I know that I'm a more engaged and hands-on father than even I had intended to be. I was wholly responsible for their day-to-day needs in a way that, it was like halfway through her inpatient treatment where I kind of had a talk with myself, and I was like, you need to start thinking like you're a single parent, because I was waiting to make little decisions, but they were still decisions. And I'm like, my mom was, staying with us through all this to help. We had a few friends coming to help with feeding. So I was like, I've asked enough of these people, and like, not even, you have help, lean on it, but like, I was their parent, and these people were not. And like, I can't, decisions have to be made. And it was just such a bizarre headspace to be in, to have her, because she was still around. She was a presence in our life, even if she was absent. But like, I didn't know how to reconcile that with what needed to, in terms of like just managing two very needy but healthy infants. It was tricky. But like, my dad came down to visit once, and he's like, I don't know how you do it, man. And I was like, what
I
choice?
do it. I don't sit around going, gosh, I wonder if there's something I'd rather be doing right now, because you literally don't have time for that, right? I mean, it's like feed, change diapers, try to sleep, repeat, got to eat somewhere in there.
Well, yeah. And I think that's, I think so much was spiraling out of control that I became obsessed with. I was like, no one else was allowed to make formula. No one else was allowed. Like, I had a little notebook that like had all their feedings. Yeah. And like, one of our friends would come over on like nights where I was told, I was not asked if I wanted a night off. I was told, like, you're not going to ask for the help, and we're telling you to like go upstairs and just like tag out for the night. And once I was out of earshot, my friend would ask my mom, like, has he just stared at the book all day? Because I would I would just like beautiful mind, just looking at like, formula ounceages and who pooped when and who slept for how long, and like trying to like control it. It's tough,
How was that, like, going from being in control of everything to now just being 50%?
So like I said earlier, she forgot. She had no memory of everything. So she continued to get ECT.
Until what point? Until the point that she came home?
She forgot everything. So like, she came home in like end of July. She doesn't remember from the boys being born at the beginning of April, and memories don't start for her really until October of that year.
Oh, okay.
So even after she was discharged, she continued to get regular treatments. And when I would pick her up, I would kind of have to like give her a crash course every time. At the beginning, when the treatment started, it was like, she was like, what are their names again? And then like that level. And then going forward, it was more like, okay, this is where we're at. Ren's sleeping 7 hours. Max is sleeping 5. He still has 1. Like, I would have to update her on what they were doing. So when she came home, the easiest thing was really for her just to kind of like be reminded, and for me to sort of guide her, because in my obsession with control, like, my sole purpose was they both have to be sleeping through most of, if not all, night by the time she comes home. Like, if I can do nothing else, so that she can just sleep. And I got them there. So then it was just kind of like reminding her and coaching her through. But once her memories started to stick again, and then as they were developing, I was very conscious of the fact that I'm calling the shots. And then the plan was never for any one of us to be like, I'm in charge of the kids and I do all the kid stuff. And like, because I didn't want to be that dad who just like helps when I'm asked to. And I sort of felt like suddenly like I'm making all the rules. Yeah, exactly. I did not want to be a dad who called her to. It's so I just got under, especially like dealing with infertility. We had a friend who was like, yeah, I got to babysit the kids this weekend. And we were like, we don't want to hang out with this couple anymore. Like, appreciate what you have. Yeah. So it was, when she came home, it was a lot of hand holding on my part, just because she needed me to, because she couldn't remember the routines. And then, like I said, once things started to stick in like October, it wasn't much longer before we started like putting our toe in with like baby food and started like experimenting with solids. So like that was really the first milestone where they started taking real food, where I stepped back and I was like, okay. And we had a conversation about it. I said, I've done all the stuff up to this point. Now we're adding these new things in, and I want this to be more of a collaboration than it has been, just because that's the type of parenting we had always wanted. That was always the plan. So going forward from there, as we hit new milestones, again, it sounds so controlling to say I let her, but like I stepped back purposely so that she could have the input and the agency over being a mother that, like, up until that point she either couldn't have had or wasn't able to for whatever reason. So yeah, it took a little while, but we got back to what we'd always hoped to be, that partnership approach to parenting, but it took some time.
Yeah. When did it feel like, oh, okay, I think we're doing this, like it feels like what we wanted? It was
probably around the time they were 1, so about a year in, when suddenly like it's like, oh, we can start, like, COVID can start to be the thing we're most afraid of. Like everybody else. When that was my biggest fear, that's when I realized, oh, okay, like I think Sandra's okay now.
Yeah, I think things are looking up, because that whole time COVID had been raging.
Oh yeah.
On.
She forgot there was a plague happening, so she go to the grocery store, and she's like, the woman in front of me seemed really irritated. That I was like, what do you mean she was irritated? She's like, she kept looking at me like I was too close, and I was like, how
close were you?
Like, oh God, how close were you?
Could she feel your breath on her neck or something?
I think it was that situation where, like, she was trying to like look at something like on the checkout rack and just like kind of leaned over the person's shoulder. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, and there's a whole new social construct with going to the grocery store. We'll have to review that.
That was strange.
That's a really good point. Like, I mean, she essentially had this period of time where she was like not fully participating in society, and all of a sudden she comes back and the rules have all changed.
Yeah.
Like, and from her perspective, if she essentially does not remember the birth and them coming home and her being so sick, then your household changed too. And the whole time you're dealing with this like very complex like mixture of emotions. I would have felt resentful that I was stuck holding the bag, which, by the way, isn't a bad thing.
Right.
Like I think that would be a really normal reaction.
Yeah. And I think it took me a while to reckon that both things could be true, that I could acknowledge that what was happening to her was this unexpected, horrifying condition, but at the same time, just the burden of responsibility.
Also, this really sucks for me. Like,
right.
Good for you to acknowledge that they both can be true, because sometimes we beat ourselves up about that, right?
Oh, totally.
I'm guilty of it.
So between her stays at the inpatient facility, she was doing like an outpatient program, and sometimes we would get on
from home, like she's on a computer zooming in.
A little bit of both. Like sometimes she would call in from home, sometimes she would go in, and like they really stressed the importance of her taking one of the boys with her, which is really hard for me. But there were a couple sessions, and she would say things like, I don't want to be a mom. And the counselor was like, that's normal. And a lot of women, feel that. And like, and if you don't want to be a mom, that's fine. And I think because of the distance, because no one was in the room with her, it was all remote. I was like, I found myself saying things like, if you don't want to be a mom, that's fine. But there's something wrong, and we need to fix that first before you can make that decision. I think before everybody finally realized how far gone she was, that was a struggle I was having with not all, but with certain healthcare providers. Is I didn't get the impression that they fully appreciated what was happening like on a boots on the ground level, like I did. She was at one of those outpatient sessions with one of our sons the day she was admitted the second time. So they called me and they're like, you got to come get your son. And the ambulance is going to come because we're not going to ask you to take her again. And we had that conversation. She's just sitting there. She's like, what if this is me now? What if I don't want to be a mom? And I said, once you're better.
Talk about that later.
And if still how you feel, like I love you, if that's what you want when you're better, we'll figure it out. And that was the rock bottom for me. As long as you're okay, I'm not going to keep you here. I'm not going to like trap you in this house with something you don't want, but I don't think you're well right now. I don't think you're yourself, and I think I just want you better, and I want you safe. And then you can do whatever you want,
So relatable.
That must have been so hard.
I think so many parents have a picture in their mind of what having kids and bringing them home is going to look like, and then they have to reconcile the reality, which is inevitably different than what we see on TV, which is, it's always like a parent taking care of a kid for a minute and then they take the baby off set and like do the rest of the scene where they can have like, they can say whole sentences to each other and stuff, right? Like,
and have whole thoughts to themselves.
Yeah.
There's this reconciling that I think we all have to do between the expectations and then the reality, which are inevitably different. And so I think maybe I'm trying to like empathize because I do a lot with how she felt. Like I was like, maybe this is just not for me. I relate to that very much. But I think the overwhelming evidence was in opposition of that sentiment. You two worked very hard to get pregnant, to stay pregnant, and then to not let preeclampsia get in the way of a healthy delivery, right? The evidence was already to the contrary of that. But then, I find that so relatable. Like that, I'm sure, was like the part that wasn't loud enough in her own narrative of what was happening at the time. And you're there being able to be objective, at least to a certain point. I mean, you had a lot going on that made you maybe a little less objective, right? Like,
for sure.
But like you're looking at the whole situation and you're like, I remember all of the effort and all of the heartbreak that process had. And that's what it took to get us here. And I know that how you feel is not your core you, but then you had to say to her, if it is, basically, I'll let you go.
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned our expectations from TV because that was the day that I realized, like I said, like after that first initial episode, we had a few good weeks, and our routine was we would wake up, we'd feed the boys, and we were just like binging Parks and Rec every morning.
Excellent.
So we get to the episode where Leslie and Ben find out that they're having triplets, and Ben, being like an accounting nerd, like runs the numbers on what it'll cost to have triplets. And we're feeding our babies, and I look over to be like, it's gonna be us. And like she's just got that like Jack Nicholson in The Shining 1,000-yard stare. And I was like, it's not gonna be that. I thought she was just like, she was reacting to what she was seeing, but I was like, this seems like an overreaction. That was the first bad day that led her to eventually being in the inpatient treatment. And don't know that I could go back to Parks and Rec. I think it's forever been sullied. But certainly did not expect the residents of Pawnee, Indiana, to be the first domino.
Supposed to be the mood lifter, right?
Yeah. It was just such a surreal moment.
So throughout this entire process, did you know about PSI? Did you attend a dad's group? How did you become connected with PSI?
Yeah, so I did not attend a dad's group. The options were pretty limited still at that point. They certainly had one. They may have had two, but they also had the call-in number.
Oh,
Emily, do you know what I'm talking about?
There was a dad chat.
Yeah, and they still do that. And I only called in once, and it starts the facilitator sort of tease everything up and then asked everybody to introduce themselves. And the introductions just went on and on and on. And then he's like, "What?" He's like, "This is the most dads we've ever had call into a single call." And so like 4 dudes got to talk. And I mean, it was nice to listen, but I was sort of like telling myself, again, it was like the control thing. I'm like, you don't have time. You got to make sure the boys are taken care of. You got to make sure you're staying on top of Sandra and her care, because I couldn't see her. But the Facebook group was really where I kind of first started to find a bit of an outlet. The first iteration of the PSI Facebook group for dads. So that was easier to kind of just like do after like putting the boys down and just like melting into the couch and not wanting to like physically speak to anybody. I could just kind of like bang it out with my thumbs, and it was very supportive. It was a small group, but yeah, that's sort of where I got started.
Tony, you found the PSI Dads Facebook group because that worked better for you than phoning into a support group. It sounds like, I mean, you really had to be thinking like, what's the best use of my time? Like, I need some extra support, but literally I've got this teeny tiny little unpredictable window. So you found the Facebook group, and what are you doing now to support dads with PSI?
After I found the Facebook group, the guy who had been running it was stepping down, and the page was going to close. And it wasn't getting a lot of use. I don't know quite how to have fixed that, but that was when I reached out to PSI and I said, if this Facebook group is going to go away, or if you need someone else to run it, like, I'll be the guy to run it. I think it's too important. I think even if it's not getting a lot of like regular interactions, like I just think it needs to be there.
Yeah.
And then I also started the conversation about becoming a peer group facilitator as well, knowing that like, when I was looking for that help, there weren't a lot of options, and they were like, yes, like we know that we need more of this, which is great. And now I'm one of 4 facilitators. So every Friday there's a dad's group, which is great. So I've been doing that, I think, almost a year now. Yeah, it's almost been a year that I've been running the second Friday dad's group.
Happy early 1-year anniversary.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. And how has that been?
It's really hard, I think, but it's very rewarding too. I think every other month I kind of like have this conversation with Sandra before. I'm like, it takes a toll emotionally, and I don't know if I can keep doing it. And then like that night I'll have like just hearing these guys. It's so hard. I think especially because most of them are around my age, and I think we're still trying to shake off some bad habits and some bad social cues about how a guy is supposed to act. And to just be there for a couple hours once a month and hear these dudes who are like, I didn't grow up talking about my feelings. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm struggling and it sucks and I need help. And I want to be better for myself and my partner and my kids. Guys who've never met each other, and some who have, because it's so great to see folks coming in like repeat visitors, but just for them to treat each other with such empathy and kindness, and to just be open to bearing themselves for strangers. It's just, it feels like we're doing the right thing, not just for ourselves and our families now, but like, especially our sons won't have this baggage, and I love my dad. My dad's a great guy, but he was not plugged in. He was not good about his feelings. And, so every time I'm like, oh, I think it's too emotionally tolling for me. Like these guys just like fill me back up, and I'm learning stuff about my own situation just by listening to them. There was one month where like one dude showed up, but it was a guy who came every month, and the previous month had been a really hard conversation because of a story someone brought to us. I was like, you're here, like I'll give you 15 minutes. I'm not going to make you sit around for the whole hour and a half because it's just the two of us. And we talked for the whole time. He's like, last month was hard. Can we talk about it, please? And like, you make these fleeting connections, but I'm just so glad that I'm able to help, the organization provide as much of an outlet for them as we can. So, I'm happy to be one of the 4 guys running the weekly calls now, because it's just.
So now they're every Friday?
Yeah, every Friday. Yeah, we've got a dad for. Great. Except for the weird months that have 5 Fridays.
Then it's only 4. During those months, it's still only for...
He really likes to talk about his feelings. I say that seriously. My husband is actually way more in touch with his feelings than I am.
Yeah.
This is wild that Emily's on a podcast talking about feelings. So
yeah. I mean, like, and Sandra too, she's been very like supportive, and she's like, you remember things I don't, and this is scary and too important to not talk about it constantly. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I wrote an article that was published in a local magazine about her experience, maybe earlier than I should have been writing about it, but random people in Rhode Island reaching out on social media who are like, yeah, like I saw that and like, thank you. And, moms who had gone through something similar or just folks whose family or who like knew a friend who did. And like, nobody talks about it because it's scary. It's embarrassing. I don't know. Like, I don't know why. Like, postpartum psychosis got like a sentence in the baby books I read, and that sentence was just call 911.
Basically,
it's like, I need more than that. I think instead of talking around it, we need to talk through it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Like being able to say that I felt 3 conflicting, totally incongruent emotions at the same time, and they were all valid. I feel like I want to give you homework and ask you to write a book. Like I want you
are
to,
a writer.
Or like write it as a journal entry. Like I've seen a lot of moms do that as part of their process, like to write the whole thing start to finish, just because there are so many like parts that remind you back of something that happened earlier in the linear story. It's just proof that time is not linear and that the 10th Doctor was right.
Is writing therapeutic? You are a writer. Is writing therapeutic for you, for your mental health maintenance? Yeah. Do you write? Can I ask a personal question about what you
Absolutely.
write about? Do you write about this experience, becoming a dad?
Yes, to all the above.
All the things.
In the moment, I was journaling, because it was the only way to get the things I couldn't say out loud, or especially to her, out of my head. I think I have a page in one journal that says like a complete list of today's irrational grievances. And it's like, things I just hated about that day.
Yep.
And there were things that would have been so inappropriate and unfair to say out loud, but like I just had to get them out. It's far too soon to say if anything's going to come of it, but Emily, to your point, I'm ahead of you on my homework assignment. I have been the last few months. I've been really like sitting down and putting thoughts to paper. And there's like a spoken word event here in Providence where I read a bit about what I've been working on. I just did
the moth
for Postpartum Psychosis Awareness Day, the event with the moth. No, it's helping me to work through it for sure. And it's something I've tried. There were a number of false starts, but it was just like, it was too soon, it was too raw a nerve. But I think I'm at a place now where I can,
right through it.
Yeah. I've read a couple of memoirs by women who went through it, and that moth event too. Like, there are things Sandra doesn't remember, and the women who have showed the courage to share their experience, the way it's helped me is it's illuminated, what may have been going on in Sandra's headspace, and helped me to better understand something that I was like so intimately involved with, but there was so much distance, whether it was like physically because she wasn't around, she wasn't telling me everything. So I've appreciated every accounting I've been able to find of people who have gone through this, and I'm so thankful that others are brave enough to share. Not just for people who went through it or watched a loved one go through it. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like it's important for you to hear from the person who experienced, other accounts from people who experienced postpartum psychosis. It's so important to hear your story of being the partner, because we don't hear so much of that. So, hello, enter a podcast. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I feel like it's giving me new understanding of my husband's experience, to hear your perspective on needing to be the in charge guy.
We're so glad that you came on here to share your story, Tony. And
thank you so much. I'm really
let us pick your
very
brain.
Grateful.
If you are willing, would you be open to a lightning round?
Of course.
Fun questions. Okay, Tony, besides this podcast, do you have a favorite podcast that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
COVID really disrupted my podcast diet, but this feels timely because I just dropped a trailer for the new Dune movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, go on. I'm ready.
So
good thing Emily didn't know about this earlier, because that's all we would have talked
about. Gom Jabbar.
Oh,
Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah.
She is a Dune fanatic like my husband. And I'm like,
goodness.
You guys need to chat about this. But this is fine. It's not that I don't care, Tony. It's just that they've read all the books and I'm like.
Gotcha. Gom Jabbar, great.
Cool.
I had read Dune 15 years ago. And after the boys were born, I decided not just to reread the book, but to finally read Frank's other books. So I call him Frank because I listen to Gom Jabbar and they call him Frank all the time. It's just two super nerdy guys who just love everything about Dune, and they do these book club episodes where they really break each one down into digestible chunks and really dig into the themes and the minutia. They'll do spin-off episodes about these tiny little details or side characters. It's Dune seems to have such a level-headed fandom around it as opposed to some other big nerdy things.
Yeah.
Love it.
Not to name any other nerdy things.
Well, I know what Danny's husband and I are going to be talking about for the next several weeks.
Could be the thing that gets my father-in-law into podcasts.
Oh.
Because I think he had the Dune series and then he introduced it to my.
Oh, nice.
And, my brother's really into it. I had 21 missed messages the other way on my WhatsApp because my husband and my brother were talking about Dune. I was like, I'm just not going to participate.
I need to get invited into that combo. I want to be in on that combo.
Anyway,
Same.
I'm going to suggest this to lots of people in my family. So,
awesome.
Cool. Gom Jabbar. Awesome. Tony, are you a fan of having a book in your ear or a book in your hands?
Book in hand.
Oh. Reading anything good?
Right now I am reading American Prometheus, which is a biography of Robert Oppenheimer.
Oh, wow.
The father of the atomic bomb. Again, in anticipation of the big movie coming out.
Did you read Jurassic Park before Jurassic Park came out?
Oh, you just picked at such an old wound. I was not allowed to see Jurassic Park in the theater.
Oh, way to bring it up.
My mom thought I'd be too scared because I was in second grade.
Tony,
but I did read the book.
Leg or a goat leg that hit the top of that Jeep. That was traumatizing.
That was when we finally rented it, when that leg hit the moonroof, she's like, see?
I told you.
And you're like, I'm fine.
But I did read the book. I read the book in fourth grade, which is definitely too early because.
Okay.
I had to read the book in order to be allowed to see the movie in theaters.
Really?
And I think my parents were trying to call my bluff. They thought that I wouldn't do it. And I was like, challenge accepted.
You want to see that movie so bad.
Yeah. What a weird approach, because I can't think of anything more traumatic to a kid than their own imagination reading a book. Because the movie presents it as the movie presents it, and that goat leg's that goat leg. But I still remember being terrified about the nights I spent reading that book. Because my head, the pictures in my head were so much worse. It was so much scarier. But cool. I also really enjoyed that, and that was the thing. I was like,
Danny's
what if I wanted to be
does
scared?
Not sound like fun.
Yeah.
Sorry to make you relive that, but thank you.
Oh, no. It's fun. It's fun to, it's the thing my mother always says, you're in therapy because I wouldn't let you see Jurassic Park when you were 8. And I was like, You're 100% correct.
See, we got to the bottom of that.
There you go.
What's your go-to for a quick mental break?
Well, now that it's nice, I got a new bike. I've had a bike for the first time in a few years. So, and now that the boys are at an age where they're easier to manage with one adult, it's been nice just to go out for an hour, ride a bike. My answer will change in about a week when the new Zelda comes out, though. So that'll probably be
yeah.
Snap, Tony. Yeah. Similar to Dune, everybody else in my family's really into Zelda.
Counting down?
Yeah, yes, there has been discussion in my house.
Cat's named Link, okay?
Oh, yeah.
There's been discussion about who's going to chip in to pay for the game because we have, my son was like Link for Halloween.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hit. Tony, what is your best parenting hack if you have one?
This is probably specific to twin/multiple parenting, but like
bring it.
Lots of people have twins. This is good.
2 people in our office have twins.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Out of 4 of us.
Wow.
We're batting 50%. We're batting 500. That's pretty good.
Come up with a schedule very early and stick to it. My guys couldn't be any different personality-wise, but like they live by the routine. It makes things easier. It made it really easy to sort of spread out feedings overnight. It made it really easy to drop bottles in between meals, naps when they finally outgrew that. They transitioned into a lot of new phases relatively easily. And that was my hack. We never deviated because I was obsessed with control. That was my
Make
obsession
a plan and don't deviate.
was a positive there, yeah.
Sometimes it works.
Yeah.
What is one way that you are going to show yourself a little bit of radical love today, Tony?
I'm not feeling especially creative or like I want to be thoughtful, but I know that if I just give myself an hour after bedtime, I know I'm going to feel better having done it than if I don't.
Emily's nodding and thinking, oh, that's a good idea.
I'm like, can I fit that in? Yeah, I mean, listen.
Let's fit that into our schedule. Emily, do you have any questions for Tony?
I do. And I'm going off script because it's
no. Okay, Tony.
So lately I've been asking people about how they take their water, but I want to go in a different direction here. I would like to know if you and I were to create a hangout space for PSI staff and volunteers, which games need to be present? Board games, card games, video games.
Board games, I think Ticket to Ride would be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Maybe have some off-the-shelf Magic the Gathering decks handy.
Ooh, uh-huh.
Whatever the latest Mario Kart is. And
yes.
A Miss Pacman cabinet.
Ooh.
Uh-huh. Wendy, I'm going to need a bigger budget.
Wendy, we're going to need some games. Listen, we're going to cool it on the bus for a while, and we're saving PSI money. You're welcome.
Right.
We're going to need some games. Well, Tony, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us a perspective that we haven't heard on the podcast yet. We're so thankful for you being here and indulging in our off-script questions and that you came on and talked about feelings. Man.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about our show on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time and, well, that'll help with our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.